Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something real today. One of the greatest weaknesses of a man who ignores you is not that he is unbothered, it's that he is afraid. Afraid of what he feels, afraid of what he might lose, and afraid of what he would have to face if he actually spoke his truth. Ignoring someone is often mistaken for strength, but in reality, it is one of the clearest signs of emotional insecurity. When a man chooses silence instead of communication, it is rarely because he is confident or unbothered. More often, because he does not know how to process what he feels. Emotions require courage to face, and ignoring someone becomes an easy escape from that inner conflict. It allows him to avoid self-reflection, responsibility, and vulnerability, all of which demand maturity. A secure man does not fear conversation. He understands that expressing himself does not make him weak, it makes him honest. In contrast, an insecure man struggles with emotional exposure. He fears saying the wrong thing, revealing his true feelings, or being seen for who he really is. Silence becomes his defense mechanism. By ignoring someone, he creates distance, hoping that distance will protect him from discomfort. But all it really does is expose his inability to handle emotional depth. Ignoring someone also reveals a lack of emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is not about control or dominance. It is about awareness, empathy, and accountability. A man who ignores you often lacks the tools to navigate emotional situations in a healthy way. Instead of addressing misunderstandings or expressing boundaries, he retreats. This retreat is not strategic, it is reactive. It comes from fear, not clarity. There is also a strong connection between ignoring behavior and unresolved inner issues. A man who is at peace with himself does not need to withdraw to feel powerful. He understands that respect is built through presence, not absence. When someone ignores you, it often means they are battling internal confusion, insecurity, or unresolved wounds that they have not learned how to confront. What makes this behavioral weakness is that it blocks connection and growth. Silence may feel safe in the moment, but it prevents understanding, healing, and progress. It keeps the man stuck in the same emotional patterns, repeating the same avoidance instead of evolving. Ignoring someone does not erase feelings, it only delays them, often making them stronger and more complicated over time. Insecurity hides behind silence because silence feels controllable. Words can be questioned, challenged, and remembered. Silence feels untouchable. But true strength does not hide. True strength shows up, speaks honestly, and accepts whatever comes with being real. Silence is often misunderstood as confidence, but in truth, it can be a powerful indicator of fear, especially the fear of accountability and commitment. When a man ignores someone instead of addressing a situation directly, he is often avoiding the responsibility that comes with honesty. Speaking requires ownership. It requires him to stand behind his actions, explain his intentions, and accept the consequences of his words. Ignoring, on the other hand, allows him to escape without explanation, leaving questions unanswered and emotions unresolved. Accountability forces a person to look at themselves clearly. It asks difficult questions. What do I really want? Did I hurt someone? Am I being fair? A man who ignores you may not be ready to confront these questions. Silence becomes a way to postpone judgment, both from others and from himself. By refusing to engage, he avoids admitting confusion, uncertainty, or guilt. This avoidance may feel like control, but it is actually a lack of emotional courage. Fear of commitment also plays a major role in this behavior. Commitment is not only about relationships, it is about consistency, intention, and emotional presence. When a man senses that communication may lead to expectations, decisions, or emotional responsibility, he may withdraw. Ignoring becomes a way to keep options open without having to make a clear choice. It allows him to remain undefined, unattached, and unchallenged, even though this ambiguity often causes emotional harm to others. This type of silence shifts the emotional burden onto the person being ignored. Instead of having an honest conversation, the man allows confusion to do the work for him. He lets distance speak where he refuses to. This is not strength, it is emotional avoidance. Strong individuals face discomfort directly because they understand that clarity, even when painful, is healthier than uncertainty. Ignoring someone also reflects a fear of vulnerability. Accountability and commitment require emotional exposure. They require a man to admit that he cares, that he may not have all the answers, or that he might be wrong. For someone who equates vulnerability with weakness, silence feels safer than sincerity. Yet this safety is an illusion. Avoidance does not remove responsibility, it only delays it. Ultimately, ignoring someone may protect a man from an uncomfortable conversation in the moment, but it reveals his struggle to stand fully in his truth. Fear keeps him quiet, not strength. Real power has never lived in avoidance, it lives in communication. When a man chooses to ignore instead of speak, he may believe he is maintaining control, but in reality he is surrendering it. Communication requires presence, awareness, and courage. Avoidance requires only distance. A man who truly understands his own strength does not disappear when things become uncomfortable. He steps forward and uses his voice because he knows that clarity is more powerful than silence. Avoidance creates an illusion of dominance. Silence can feel like a weapon, a way to dictate the emotional climate without saying a word. But this kind of control is fragile. It depends on confusion, not confidence. The moment someone no longer reacts to the silence, its power collapses. Communication, however, does not rely on manipulation. It stands firm because it is rooted in truth. A man who communicates clearly does not fear how he will be perceived because he knows who he is. Speaking openly also requires emotional discipline. It means choosing honesty over comfort and respect over ego. Many men avoid communication because words demand responsibility. Once something is said, it cannot be taken back. Silence feels safer because it keeps intentions hidden. Yet hiding is not strength. Strength is being willing to be seen, even when the outcome is uncertain. When communication is avoided, misunderstandings grow. Distance creates stories, assumptions, and emotional chaos. A man who relies on avoidance allows confusion to speak for him. That confusion often damages trust, connection, and respect. In contrast, a man who communicates sets boundaries, expresses intentions, and brings stability. Even difficult truths, when spoken clearly, reduce emotional tension and create space for growth. Real power is also shown through emotional leadership. A man who communicates does not wait for situations to explode before addressing them. He understands that calm, timely conversation prevents unnecessary conflict. Avoidance delays resolution and intensifies emotional strain. It does not end problems, it multiplies them. Communication also reflects self-awareness. A man who understands his emotions can articulate them. Avoidance often signals inner confusion. When someone does not know what they feel or what they want, silence becomes a hiding place. But clarity comes from engagement, not withdrawal. Speaking forces alignment between thoughts, feelings, and actions. Ultimately, communication is an act of respect. It says, "You matter enough for me to explain myself." Avoidance sends the opposite message. A man who values true power does not fear dialogue. He understands that his voice, used with honesty and intention, carries far more strength than silence ever could. Ignoring someone does not just affect a moment, it quietly blocks personal growth and self-awareness. When a man chooses distance instead of dialogue, he misses the opportunity to learn something about himself. Every meaningful interaction, especially difficult ones, acts like a mirror. It reflects habits, emotional patterns, fears, and strengths. By ignoring, a man turns away from that mirror. He avoids seeing the parts of himself that need development, and without awareness, growth becomes impossible. Growth is uncomfortable by nature. It asks a person to question their reactions, acknowledge mistakes, and sit with emotions they would rather avoid. A man who ignores someone is often resisting this discomfort. Silence becomes a way to stay emotionally unchanged. As long as he does not engage, he does not have to examine why he reacts the way he does or why certain situations trigger him. This keeps him emotionally stagnant, repeating the same patterns in different relationships and circumstances. Self-awareness is built through reflection and feedback. Conversations, even tense ones, provide that feedback. They reveal how one's words and actions impact others. A man who avoids communication denies himself this insight. Over time, he may begin to believe that problems simply disappear on their own, when in reality they resurface in new forms. Ignoring someone does not erase emotional consequences, it only pushes them into the background, where they quietly shape future behavior. There is also a loss of emotional depth in avoidance. Growth expands emotional range, allowing a person to experience empathy, understanding, and connection more fully. When a man ignores instead of engages, he narrows his emotional world. He becomes less capable of handling complexity, less patient with vulnerability, and less open to change. This emotional limitation may feel safe, but it ultimately restricts his ability to form meaningful bonds. Avoidance can also distort self-perception. Without honest interaction, a man may see himself as justified or unchallenged. Communication introduces perspective. It forces him to consider viewpoints beyond his own. By refusing that exchange, he remains locked in a one-sided narrative where growth is unnecessary and accountability is optional. True self-awareness requires courage. It requires a willingness to listen even when the message is uncomfortable. A man who ignores someone chooses short-term emotional comfort over long-term development. He protects his ego at the cost of evolution. Over time, this choice compounds, leaving him emotionally underdeveloped despite age or experience. Growth comes from engagement, not escape. When a man avoids conversation, he avoids transformation. He stays where he is, while life continues to demand more awareness, more maturity, and more emotional presence. Emotional maturity is revealed in how a person handles discomfort. When a man chooses to ignore instead of engage, it often shows an inability to sit with uncomfortable emotions. Discomfort is not a sign of weakness. It is a signal that something needs attention. Emotionally mature individuals understand this and face it directly. Avoidance, on the other hand, reflects a lack of emotional regulation and self-control. Ignoring someone becomes a way to escape feelings that feel too heavy, confusing, or threatening to the ego. Facing discomfort requires emotional strength. It means allowing difficult conversations to happen without becoming defensive or shutting down. A mature man understands that discomfort is temporary, but the damage caused by avoidance can be long-lasting. When he ignores someone, he delays resolution and allows emotional tension to build. This tension does not disappear. It accumulates and often resurfaces in more destructive ways. Emotional immaturity often confuses avoidance with self-protection. While boundaries are healthy, silence used as punishment or escape is not. A mature man can set boundaries with clarity and respect. He can say what he needs without disappearing. Ignoring someone removes clarity, and replaces it with confusion, leaving the other person to guess what went wrong. This guessing creates emotional imbalance and undermines trust. Running from discomfort also limits emotional resilience. Resilience is built by facing challenges, not avoiding them. Each difficult conversation strengthens emotional muscles such as patience, empathy, and self-awareness. When a man repeatedly avoids these moments, he weakens his ability to handle emotional stress. Over time, even minor conflicts can feel overwhelming because he has not developed the skills to manage them. Avoidance also reflects fear of vulnerability. Discomfort often arises when emotions are exposed. Speaking honestly means risking misunderstanding, rejection, or judgment. An emotionally mature man accepts these risks because he values authenticity over image. He understands that vulnerability is not about weakness, it is about openness. Ignoring someone keeps emotions hidden, but it also keeps connection out of reach. There is also an element of respect tied to emotional maturity. Engaging in difficult conversations shows respect for both oneself and others. It acknowledges that emotions matter and that relationships deserve honesty. Ignoring someone dismisses their experience and prioritizes personal comfort over mutual understanding. This imbalance erodes emotional integrity. Choosing to face discomfort is a sign of leadership in emotional spaces. It shows the ability to remain present even when situations are tense. A man who does this builds trust and stability. One who avoids discomfort creates uncertainty and emotional distance. Emotional maturity is not about always feeling comfortable. It is about being willing to feel uncomfortable when growth, clarity, and respect require it. Ignoring someone may feel easier in the moment, but it reveals a reluctance to develop the emotional strength needed for deeper connection and personal evolution. Respect is not created through silence or distance. It is built through honesty and presence. When a man ignores someone, he may believe he is protecting his dignity or maintaining control, but true respect never requires disappearance. Respect means acknowledging another person's humanity, emotions, and time. It means understanding that even difficult truths are kinder than unanswered silence. Distance without explanation is not strength, it is avoidance disguised as pride. Honesty is an act of courage. It requires a man to speak clearly, even when the conversation is uncomfortable or the outcome uncertain. Respectful behavior does not always sound gentle, but it is always clear. When a man is honest, he allows the other person to understand where they stand. Ignoring someone removes that clarity and replaces it with doubt, confusion, and emotional imbalance. This lack of clarity is a form of disrespect, whether intentional or not. Distance is often used as a shortcut to avoid responsibility. Instead of expressing feelings, setting boundaries, or admitting uncertainty, a man may choose silence. This silence shifts the emotional weight onto the other person, forcing them to interpret behavior without guidance. Respect does not leave others guessing. It communicates openly so that both sides can respond with awareness rather than anxiety. Honesty also reflects self-respect. A man who respects himself does not need to hide behind silence. He understands that his voice matters and that using it responsibly strengthens his character. Avoiding communication suggests discomfort with one's own emotions or decisions. Respect begins internally, and when a man cannot face his own truth, it becomes difficult for him to honor someone else's. There is also a difference between space and neglect. Healthy space is communicated, it is explained and agreed upon. Ignoring someone is not space, it is withdrawal without consent. Respectful distance says, I need time, and here is why. Disrespectful distance says nothing at all. One preserves dignity, the other erodes trust. Honesty builds emotional safety. When people know what to expect, they feel grounded. Silence creates instability. A man who chooses honesty, even when it reveals flaws or uncertainty, creates a foundation of trust. That trust is the cornerstone of respect. Without it, relationships become fragile, regardless of how strong they may appear on the surface. Ignoring someone also denies them closure. Closure is not always about agreement, it is about understanding. Respect allows room for closure even when paths diverge. Distance without explanation leaves emotional doors open, unresolved, and heavy. A respectful man does not disappear. He communicates an ending or a boundary with clarity. Respect is visible in consistency. Honesty aligns actions with words. Ignoring someone creates a gap between intention and behavior. That gap damages credibility. Over time, repeated avoidance teaches others that silence can be expected instead of sincerity. This pattern weakens a man's emotional integrity. Ultimately, respect is not proven by how detached someone can be, but by how responsibly they can engage. Honesty requires presence, accountability, and emotional effort. Distance requires none of these. A man who chooses honesty over silence demonstrates real respect for himself, for others, and for the truth, even when difficult, is always more honorable than disappearance.